Hey everybody, this morning I'm sitting here and I'm editing the video that's going to become the video for the Sencore oscilloscope. I decided to do a video on my Sencore oscilloscope, and what ended up happening is I ended up running into a problem with the new camera. Not the camera itself. I've already gotten several comments on how much you guys are enjoying the new camera, the quality of the video. Unfortunately, that's caused a problem that I wasn't expecting, which is the video files are much larger. So this is my Mac that I do my editing on. It's running Mac OS X. Its processor is 2.16 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo, and it's got 1 gig of 667 megahertz DDR2 SD RAM. The software that I'm using, iMovie 2011 version 9.04, so it's an old version. It came with the PC, so that's why I use it. I like it better than in my very early videos. If you guys have seen any of my really early videos, those were edited with Windows Movie Maker, and Movie Maker took a lot longer and had less features. I like the user interface with this software, and I've gotten so used to it now. But unfortunately, this software does some things to the video. For instance, if I want to just load the video files in RAW, I can cut and paste, but I can't do things like effects like slow motion or speed up. And the speed up is kind of a nice feature. So like if I say, well, I'm going to take the cover off, I can keep that video of me actually unscrewing all the screws, but just speed it up really fast. Or if I'm getting ready to put a collar in the mill or something like that, or set something up, I might want to keep that video content, but not have it kind of drag by. So I speed it up. Well, in order to do that feature on here, the software wants to optimize the video clip first. And so what I do is when I load the videos in, I just select that as I'm loading them into the software that it optimizes them automatically. So that takes time. And the larger the file is, the more time it takes. Well, now with the new HD camera, it's taking a lot longer. The second problem is, when you optimize video, what the software does is it keeps the original videos intact on the hard drive and then copies them into another folder, another directory, and optimizes them there so that you can always revert back to your originals. So the problem with that is now you basically, as soon as you optimize those video clips, you take up twice the space on the hard drive. My hard drive is 319.73 gigabytes. Basically it's a 320 gig hard drive, which I remember when that was considered huge. Well, with this video, it's really starting to eat into it. A big part of my problem, by the way, is my archives. What I have here is I've got this folder right here, and this has, not all, it has a good amount of my YouTube videos that are already posted online. So I keep the originals. I've got one computer upstairs, my Windows-based computer PC upstairs. The hard drive on that's much smaller than this, and that's pretty much full. So the hard drive in my PC upstairs is pretty much chock full of archived video. And then before I get that annoying phone call, I was just going to check and see. This folder here has 74 completed uploaded videos in it, and takes up 139, just over 139 gigs of my hard drive. So ideally, I'd like to store those somewhere else. Problem is, I can't burn them to DVDs because it would take a bazillion of them to store all of that. And it takes forever to do. I got a little thumb drive here. This is a 128 gigabyte thumb drive. This was on sale. It's a PNY. It's a good quality. It's not. I think it came from. I asked for this for Christmas, so so I've already offloaded a lot of the stuff onto this. So, you know, not the safest place to keep it, but we're not talking about my family photos and videos and stuff like that. We're talking about the YouTube stuff. The reality is the YouTube stuff is out there on YouTube. But it's nice to have the original videos, because if I ever wanted to do, I don't know, a retrospective or something like that, and I wanted to go back and look for some clips, you know, that are kind of interesting, like the time that I was getting the Oliver loader out of the woods there and almost dropped that backhoe attachment on myself, stuff like that. But anyways, so the drive is too full, and what ends up happening is, so when I load videos into here, I've gotten into the habit of, as soon as they're in here and they're optimized into the software, I go into the original files and I delete the original clips so that I can save hard drive space. Well, what happened is I inadvertently, I tried loading some and I ran out of hard drive space, and the software just stops loading. It stops like it's done, but it hadn't finished all the clips. And then I accidentally went and I actually went into some of the files, some of the directories for the for the iMovie there, and found a whole bunch of files that, even though I had taken them out of the software here through the interface, they kept, for some reason, they stayed on the hard drive, and they were clogging up my hard drive. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So I ended up freeing up about like over 30 gig of hard drive space by erasing all of these files. But I inadvertently erased some of the clips I had loaded, and I had already erased them off of the original directories or folders that I had loaded them up on from the camera. So the reason why I'm telling you all this is because I got to put this clip of me talking to you, telling you about this, at the beginning of this Sencore video. Otherwise, this Sencore video doesn't make any sense, because it starts basically with me just cleaning the screen and the thing's already apart. So the main information that you missed at the beginning, the big clip at the beginning that I erased, the main information was where this scope came from, the history of it, some information about the scope, and basically me just cleaning the outside of the scope, which was filthy. You know, it would have been nice to be able to see it before and after, and taking the chassis out of the outer case, and that was pretty much all you missed. So on to the scope. So the Sencore scope. This is a Sencore SC61 oscilloscope, and it's actually the second or third one that I've owned. And what ended up happening was, way back when I was in high school, I started working for a repair shop locally, and we had been doing television repair there, and a rep from Sencore, back then they had reps that would actually come into your workplace. You call them up and invite them. They were kind of like vacuum cleaner salesmen. They'd come in, they'd bring in the equipment, and they'd set it up, and they'd show you how much time you could save troubleshooting if you use their equipment. That was the big issue. Get it done quicker, save time, more profit. So it was kind of cool. They would come in, and we had a Sencore rep come in, and he showed us some of the new things. And one of the new things was their new oscilloscope. Sencore's been making oscilloscope. Sencore had made oscilloscopes for quite a while. There are vacuum tube oscilloscopes floating around. Occasionally you still see one pop up. You know, ancient technology. But they were touting their new SC61 Waveform analyzer, or tracker, I think they called it. And what their new scope did, it had some really innovative, really cool features that they had built into the scope. And so that's why they didn't want to call it just an oscilloscope. So they called it a waveform either an analyzer or a tracker, I forget. So the SC61 was the first big advance in oscilloscopes that we had seen on the market. It had a built-in frequency counter. It had it has an LCD display above the screen, so you can instantaneously see the frequency of the waveform that you're scoping. It has a DC voltmeter built in, so with the push of a button you can see the DC voltage at the test point, and you can see voltage peak to peak, and you can do a bunch of other different things. There are special settings on there too that we never used, but it was great. It had a horizontal and vertical button for the trigger, so when you wanted to trigger the scope to a horizontal waveform, back then 15,750 hertz, I think, 15.75 kilohertz is ringing a bell for the horizontal rate. Vertical was 60. You could just push the vertical button or the horizontal button and it would lock to that waveform, which was kind of cool. The other thing this scope could do that prior to this scope, as far as I knew, there wasn't a scope that could do it. You could actually put the probe on the collector of a horizontal output transistor, which a collector on a horizontal output transistor used to have a really huge pulse on it, like 1,000 volts peak to peak or something like that, or 1,100, somewhere around there. And if you took a conventional scope and you put the probe on there, you could damage the scope. So this thing would actually let you look at a waveform that, as far as us TV technicians were concerned, we had only seen it theoretically on paper. We had never seen one. So that was really kind of cool. So that guy from Sencore ended up convincing my boss at the time to buy the scope, which I think at the time was $2,000 or $3,000. And we bought, I think, a television analyst and some other, a couple other things initially. And then later he came back, we bought some other stuff. But, you know, you finance it all for the most part. But my boss, he was a cash customer, so he paid cash, I think, for everything. So that was back in, let's see, like I said, I was, I think, a sophomore in high school. So it was back in 1982. And back in 82, that scope was there. I worked on and off through the years for that gentleman and used that scope for quite a few years. Even after I had gone on my own and opened my own television repair shop in the city, I still used to moonlight because he had trouble finding anybody. He had some guys working there that just were not good technicians. So anyways, I used to go there at night sometimes after work and just, you know, we'd sit in his office and BS, and I'd knock out a couple of the tough dog sets. And you know, I liked this scope so much, cutting my teeth on it, that when I opened my own shop, I bought one. And then I didn't have that scope very long. This is the SC61. The SC61 was then replaced by this was a 60 megahertz oscilloscope, but they always told us it was usable to 100. So I guess what happens is the response drops off as you get closer to 100 megahertz. So up to 60 megahertz, it's pretty rock solid. So then they replaced this scope with a model, a short-lived model called, I think, the 3080. And the 3080 had the same like physical shape as the scope, but it had a lot more white. I think the cabinet was white instead of gray. Looked like it belonged in a hospital or something, or more of a lab setting. And that was an 80 megahertz scope. And so there was an improvement to the circuitry. They improved the response on the front end, and were able to get it to be certified as an 80 megahertz oscilloscope. That didn't last long because then they came out with the 3100. I forgot. They came out with their big baby, the big waveform analyzer, which they had changed the footprint basically. They went to a more of a shorter, wider, like a more conventional scope look. Had all of the features that were in the previous SC61 and 3080, and then they added even a couple more things. They had a much crisper looking CRT and nice screen. And that scope, believe it or not, it still trades on eBay for some pretty decent money. It was just a really nice scope. Nowhere near what it sold for originally. I think when that scope came out, it was close to $4,000. And so anyways, so I ended up actually not buying that scope new. When I wanted that newest, latest, greatest model, it had already been out for a few years, so I scored one on eBay. I forgot what I paid for it, but I got, you know, a really good deal because this high-end equipment back then, it was kind of like a new car. As soon as you drove it off the lot, it depreciated, you know, and some things held their value much better than others. But I got a really good deal on the scope, so then I had that really nice scope. So fast forward to a couple of years ago when I visited the store that I worked in back in '82. It had been closed now. My previous boss had passed away, and the son was basically, you know, he's taken over the for lack of a better term, he basically inherited this whole store that's now been closed for like eons. The heat's been off because it was ridiculous. It was an old oil-fired steam boiler. Cost a fortune to heat the place, so they shut the heat off. So you can imagine now, this place has been unheated, had a flat roof on it that always leaked. So leaky roof, unheated building, empty for years, gone through umpteen New England winters. Make a long story short, there was water damage to stuff in there, there was mold and mildew issues like crazy. So I was walking around in there and looking at some of the stuff, and I had picked a few items, and then we went back in the repair shop, and it was like stepping back in time because, you know, everything was still where I remembered it. But the ceiling had partially caved in one area, and they're sitting up on the shelf looking like a complete turd because it had garbage from the had one of the suspended ceilings, and the ceiling tiles had gotten wet and crumbly, and then when they dried out and they collapsed, there was just all broken pieces of tile everywhere, and dust and dirt and mildew and just a mess. Sitting up there, you know, being completely mistreated was this old scope. So I said, I think I gave him like 20 or 25 bucks for the scope. I picked up the scope. I picked up a PR57 Sencore PowerRite, which is what they call a I forget what they called it, but basically it was a variac or variable or auto transformer in a box with an isolation transformer and a big meter up front so you could monitor voltage and current. That was replaced later on in Sencore's line by what they call the PowerRite. So the PR57 was the PowerRite 57, and then they replaced it later with the PowerRite. I forgot what the model number was, which was an improvement in some ways because it gave you two LCD screens so you could simultaneously monitor the voltage output and the current draw. I like the big analog meter on the previous one actually better. So, anyways. I had every bench. I had 3 workbenches at my shop. I only had one other technician that I employed, but we kept the third bench all the time because sometimes it was just easier if you cracked the set open and needed to wait for a part. It might be easier to just let it sit, or if you were burning in a set, test running it on the bench, making sure it was in fact fixed before you sent it out the door and buttoned it up. Or you should do that in the other order, button it up and then send it out the door. Anyways. So I had gotten the PowerRite, an old Z meter, which in case you don't know what a Z meter is, it's an inductive capacitive analyzer. And again, Sencore back in the early day had a very simple thing they called a ringer, which was for testing flyback transformers, and then they incorporated, I think, a capacitance checker in there. And then they really got into it. They invented a new Z meter. I forgot the model numbers. I think the 75. I think the 53 was the earliest Z meter, and then they went to, I think, the 75, and then they went to the LC102. I've owned all of them except the latest, greatest one that they came out with before they stopped making them, which I think was the LC103. The LC102, it can be basically fully automatic. It's got an LCD readout. When they went to the LC103, they improved upon it because they gave you an LED readout, which was easier to read, and they gave you actual push buttons, I think, instead of the soft touch membrane, which they have on the LC102. I've got the LC102 up in my office, but I still bought the old LC75 or 53 or whatever it was. That's down in the basement. That's going to be cleaned up just like this thing had to be cleaned up. That's an LED readout, big push buttons. I like that meter. I'll probably end up selling the 102 just because the 102 has a lot more value on the secondary used market. Even today on eBay, they still trade decent. Because a Z meter, any type of work you're doing that involves needing to test capacitors, it's going to be usable for that. So, all right, so here on the scope, I just cleaned up the outside of it and everything. I talked about how any kind of smoke smoke basically from a wood stove or fireplace in a house, how it used to go inside the electronics and just the high voltage field that's built up, static electricity would just draw that stuff in and make it stick to CRTs like crazy. And he had employed several technicians over the years who were heavy smokers. I mean, like chain smokers then. So this thing had a lot of cigarette smoke that got in there. So at the start, the next clip you're going to see after I finally shut up is going to be me cleaning off the film, because the blue screen that you see on the scope when it's assembled is actually a plastic overlay. It's part of the cabinet. When you take the cabinet off, that blue screen comes off, and you can actually see the actual the front face of the CRT screen itself, which has got the classic, gray CRT screen. And CRT is cathode ray tube, for anybody who has lost what the hell I'm talking about. And cathode ray tubes are pretty much a thing of the past. That was back before we had the lovely LEDs. Oh, and plasma. So, I clean off that screen, and then a little later on, I'm just going to make a quick reference that a little later on, there's a couple other clips that are missing where I kind of jump forward. One of the clips, unfortunately, was where I showed the wafer style switches that were used and the volts per division switching. And I had a really nice shot of that. Came out beautiful with the new camera. But so it basically shows how I clean the contacts on that and everything. And all right, so without further ado, let's get back into this Sencore video. So here you can, this is actually the face of the CRT. And so the blue looking screen that you normally see on the front of these is actually a plastic overlay, like a protective screen in front of the CRT. But you can see that electronics have a tendency of being able to suck in any of the smoke that's in the air. So whenever we used to get TV sets in from a house that had a fireplace or a wood stove, we knew, because we'd find black soot on the inside of the cabinet where nobody could ever get in to clean. And then consequently, if they had tobacco smoke in the air regularly, then we'd get the tobacco smoke. And you can see there's actually a little bit of a film on this whole thing, and it's really pronounced right there. And the beauty of that being glass is that just a little bit of glass cleaner and a little bit of wiping, and we can improve that quite a bit. Believe it or not, that was actually a clean spot on this rag when I started. That little corner right there is taking a little bit more scrubbing. 3:47. Oh, we're very close to kickoff time for the Patriots playoff game against Kansas City. I might have to take a break. Come back to this some other time. That discoloration up in the corner right there might actually be permanent. That might actually be heat related due to the CRT discoloring the mask. The mask is actually internal to behind the glass there, and it has the actual pattern. Okay. Now, this front faceplate that I wanted to clean, unfortunately, my plan to do that, I'm going to have to just rely on as much elbow grease as I can. See, that's whitening up right there. That's a little bit of an improvement, but not much. And the reason is that I believe, now that I recall, that this chassis right here is actually part of the faceplate, and then they just use adhesive to stick this on there. So I'd have to peel this off to separate it from that to clean it really well. And I got a good possibility of damaging that, because it's a thin, I think it's a thin piece of aluminum that they actually silk screen this onto, and then they glue it to the front of this chassis. So it is actually a separate little piece, but my experience has been when you try and peel these off, it tends to start bending and it makes a real mess.
I can take the knobs off to help me clean it. It'll aid a little bit. All right, let's go check out the Pats game.
Oh, that's so loud.